I found my wife's second phone, hidden in her gym bag. The messages went back 3 years. Derek Lawson was 41 years old when he found the second phone. It was a Tuesday evening in early October 2024, one of those ordinary autumn nights that seem completely unremarkable until they become the hinge on which your entire life swings. Derek had come home from work at his usual time, around 6:30 p.m., parking his silver Honda Accord in the driveway of their 4-bedroom colonial in Naperville, Illinois. The house was worth about $485,000 now, almost double what they'd paid for it 12 years ago when the neighborhood was still developing and the schools hadn't yet earned their reputation for excellence. His wife, Michelle, wasn't home yet. She had Pilates on Tuesday evenings, or so she said, at a studio called Core Balance about 15 minutes away. The classes ran from 5:30 to 6:30, which meant she usually walked through the door around 7:00, flushed and energized, carrying her purple yoga mat and that oversized gym bag she'd bought at Lululemon for $178. Derek had planned to start dinner. He was going to make his specialty, chicken parmesan with homemade marinara sauce, something he'd learned to cook from his Italian grandmother and had been perfecting for 20 years. He'd stopped at the grocery store on the way home and picked up fresh basil, San Marzano tomatoes, and a nice bottle of Chianti that had cost $34. He was feeling romantic. Their 15th wedding anniversary was coming up in 3 weeks, and Derek had been thinking about surprising Michelle with a trip to Napa Valley. He'd already been researching wineries and boutique hotels, imagining long afternoons tasting Cabernet and walking through vineyards hand in hand. But when Derek walked into the kitchen, he noticed Michelle's gym bag sitting on the counter. That was strange. She never left without it on Pilates nights. Had she forgotten it? Was she not actually at class? Derek pulled out his phone to text her, but then he stopped. A thought crossed his mind, one he immediately felt guilty for having. Michelle had been different lately, more distant, more protective of her phone, more likely to step into another room to take calls, more frequently working late at her job as a marketing director at Westfield Consumer Brands, where she earned $127,000 a year, plus bonuses that typically added another $15,000 to $20,000. He'd noticed these changes over the past several months, but he'd explained them away. Work stress, the pressure of her recent promotion, the fact that they'd both been so busy that quality time had become a luxury rather than a given. Every marriage went through phases like this, didn't it? 15 years was a long time. The passion naturally ebbed and flowed. But standing there in the kitchen, staring at that gym bag, Derek felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel before: suspicion. He told himself he was being paranoid. He told himself that checking her bag would be a violation of trust, the kind of thing insecure husbands did in bad movies. He told himself that Michelle loved him, that they had a good marriage, that they'd built a life together that meant something. Then he unzipped the bag anyway. At first, everything looked normal. Yoga pants, sports bra, a towel, her water bottle, a small makeup bag, hair ties. But as Derek moved things around, his fingers touched something hard at the bottom, hidden beneath a folded sweatshirt. He pulled it out and felt his stomach drop. It was a phone, a cheap Samsung prepaid phone, the kind you could buy at any convenience store for $50 with no contract required. It wasn't Michelle's iPhone, the one she carried everywhere, the one with the rose gold case and the cracked corner from when she dropped it at the grocery store last summer. This was something else entirely, something hidden, something secret. Derek's hands were shaking as he pressed the power button. The screen lit up, asking for a passcode, 4 digits. He tried Michelle's birthday. Nothing. He tried their anniversary. Nothing. He tried the last 4 digits of her social security number, which he knew from doing their taxes together for 15 years. The phone unlocked. What Derek found in that phone over the next 45 minutes would destroy everything he thought he knew about his wife, his marriage, and the last 3 years of his life. It would reveal a level of deception so calculated, so deliberate, so utterly devastating, that he would later describe it as discovering that the person sleeping next to him every night was actually a stranger wearing his wife's face. But Derek wasn't ready to confront any of that yet, not until he understood the full scope of what he was dealing with, not until he had processed the shock enough to think clearly, not until he had a plan, because Derek Lawson was an accountant. A senior financial analyst at Morrison & Webb, one of the largest accounting firms in Chicago, where he earned $118,000 a year reviewing corporate balance sheets and identifying discrepancies. His entire career was built on noticing things that didn't add up, on following paper trails, on finding the truth hidden beneath layers of obfuscation. If his wife had been deceiving him, he was going to find out exactly how, exactly when, exactly why, and exactly with whom. And then there would be consequences. But before we continue with this incredible story, please subscribe to this channel and comment where you are watching from. Don't forget to like this video as well. Let's get this story to 10,000 likes. These all mean a lot to us, and there are brand new stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. Faisyi Santiuta, Derek Lawson grew up in Oak Park, Illinois, the only child of Frank and Maria Lawson. His father was a postal worker who delivered mail on the same route for 32 years, earning a steady but modest income that peaked at around $58,000 before he retired. His mother was a school secretary who worked at the same elementary school from the time Derek was in kindergarten until he graduated from college. Together, they taught Derek the value of hard work, honesty, and loyalty. They'd been married for 47 years when Frank passed away from a heart attack in 2019, and Maria still wore her wedding ring every day. Derek had been a good student, not brilliant but diligent, the kind of kid who earned his A's through effort rather than natural talent. He'd gone to the University of Illinois on a partial scholarship, majored in accounting because it seemed practical, and graduated in the top 15% of his class. He'd gotten his CPA license at 24, joined Morrison & Webb at 26, and had been there ever since, slowly climbing the ladder from junior analyst to senior analyst to his current position, managing a team of 6 accountants who handled some of the firm's largest corporate clients. His salary of $118,000 put him comfortably in the upper middle class, especially combined with Michelle's income. Together, they made about $260,000 a year before bonuses, which was enough to afford their house in Naperville, 2 cars, his Honda Accord worth about $28,000, and her BMW X3 worth $52,000, annual vacations to places like Cancun and Hawaii, and a lifestyle that Derek considered blessed but not extravagant. They'd met at a friend's birthday party when Derek was 25 and Michelle was 23. She'd been working as a junior account coordinator at a small advertising agency, earning $38,000 a year and living in a cramped studio apartment in Lincoln Park, with a roommate who worked odd hours as a bartender. Derek had been immediately attracted to her. Michelle was beautiful in a classic way, with honey blonde hair and green eyes and a smile that made him feel like he was the only person in the room. She was ambitious, driven, full of ideas about where she wanted her career to go. She talked about becoming a creative director someday, about running campaigns for major brands, about making a name for herself in the competitive world of Chicago advertising. Derek had loved her ambition. He'd loved how different she was from him, how she dreamed big while he planned carefully, how she pushed boundaries while he respected them. They'd balanced each other, or so he'd thought. She'd encouraged him to ask for raises, to negotiate harder, to believe he deserved more. He'd provided stability, consistency, a safe harbor when her industry's ups and downs became overwhelming. They'd dated for 2 years before getting engaged. Derek had proposed at the top of the Willis Tower, on a clear autumn evening, when you could see 4 states from the observation deck. The ring had cost $12,000, more than Derek had ever spent on anything in his life. But Michelle had always talked about wanting a princess-cut diamond, and Derek wanted to give her exactly what she wanted. The wedding had been elegant but reasonable. 150 guests at a country club in the western suburbs, a ceremony officiated by Michelle's uncle, who was a retired minister, a reception with a live band and an open bar that had cost them $45,000 total after contributions from both sets of parents. Derek's father had given a toast about how proud he was of his son, and Derek had cried, which he almost never did. The first 5 years of marriage had been good, really good. They'd bought their house, furnished it room by room as they could afford to, planted a garden in the backyard, adopted a golden retriever named Charlie, who'd lived with them until cancer took him 3 years ago. They'd talked about kids constantly, made plans, picked out names. Michelle wanted 2, a boy and a girl. Derek would have been happy with however many they were blessed with, but the kids never came. They'd started trying when Michelle was 28. After a year of nothing, they'd consulted a fertility specialist. The tests had been inconclusive at first, then pointed toward Michelle having a condition that made conception difficult, but not impossible. They'd tried IUI twice, at $1,500 per cycle, plus medications. Nothing. They'd discussed IVF, which would cost $15,000 to $20,000 per cycle with no guarantee of success. Michelle had been hesitant. The hormones were brutal, she said. The emotional toll was too much. She needed a break from the pressure, from the constant focus on her body and its failures. Derek had understood. He'd supported her decision to take a step back. He'd told her that if they were meant to have children, it would happen, and if not, they would find other ways to build a meaningful life together. He'd meant every word. But something had shifted in their marriage around that time. Michelle had thrown herself into her career with new intensity, working longer hours, traveling more frequently for client meetings and conferences. She'd been promoted twice in 4 years, jumping from account coordinator to senior account manager to associate director to her current position as marketing director. Her salary had more than tripled since they'd gotten married. Derek had been proud of her success. He'd celebrated every promotion, every raise, every award she won. He'd handled more of the household responsibilities to free up her time for work. He'd learned to cook elaborate dinners that could wait in the oven when she came home late. He'd never complained, never made her feel guilty, never suggested that her career was coming at the expense of their relationship. Maybe he should have. Looking back now, standing in their kitchen with that secret phone in his hand, Derek could see the warning signs he'd missed or chosen to ignore, the increasing emotional distance, the way Michelle seemed to be performing the role of wife rather than actually being present in their marriage, the sex that had become infrequent and mechanical, something to check off a list rather than a genuine expression of intimacy. But Derek had believed in his marriage. He'd believed in Michelle. He'd believed that the foundation they'd built over 15 years was strong enough to weather any storm. He'd been wrong. The messages on the secret phone went back 3 years. 3 years. That meant Michelle had been maintaining this hidden life since October 2021, through countless dinners where she'd looked him in the eyes and told him about her day, through 2 anniversaries where they'd exchanged heartfelt cards and made love, through holidays with family where they'd posed for photos as the happy couple everyone believed them to be. The contact was saved simply as J. Derek scrolled to the oldest messages, forcing himself to read from the beginning. He needed to understand the full arc of this betrayal, not just glimpse the current state of it. October 14th, 2021. The first message. J. It was really nice talking to you at the conference. I haven't been able to stop thinking about our conversation. Michelle, me too. I don't usually connect with people like that. There's something about you. J. I felt it too. I know we're both married and I'm not trying to complicate anything, but I'd love to get coffee sometime, just to talk. Michelle, I'd like that, but we should be careful. Derek felt his jaw tighten. We should be careful. Not, I'm married and this is inappropriate. Not, I don't think that's a good idea. Just, we should be careful. As if the only concern was not getting caught. The messages continued. Coffee had led to lunch. Lunch had led to drinks after work. Drinks had led to what Derek had dreaded finding. December 3rd, 2021. J. Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. Michelle. I know. I feel guilty, but I also feel more alive than I have in years. Derek is a good man, but there's no passion anymore. It's like living with a roommate. J. Linda's the same way. We're just going through the motions. But with you, I feel like I can be myself. Michelle. When can I see you again? Derek had to set the phone down. His hands were shaking too badly to scroll. His wife had called him a roommate. She'd complained about their marriage to another man while pretending everything was fine at home. She'd been sleeping with someone named Jay for 3 years, and Derek had never suspected a thing. He took several deep breaths, forcing himself to stay calm. Getting emotional wouldn't help. He needed information. He needed to understand who Jay was, how deep this went, and what Michelle's endgame was. He picked up the phone again and kept reading. Over the following weeks, Derek pieced together a timeline of his wife's affair. Jay was Jason Whitmore, a regional sales director at a pharmaceutical company called Vertex Medical Solutions. He was 44 years old, married for 16 years to a woman named Linda, and had 2 children, a son aged 14 and a daughter aged 11. He earned approximately $185,000 per year and lived in a $720,000 house in Hinsdale, about 20 minutes from Naperville. Derek learned all of this from the messages themselves, where Michelle and Jason discussed their lives with the casual intimacy of people who had been sharing secrets for years. Jason complained about Linda's lack of ambition, about how she'd given up her career to raise their kids, and now seemed content to spend her days at the gym and having lunch with friends. Michelle complained about Derek's predictability, his lack of spontaneity, his tendency to plan everything weeks in advance. "He's so boring," Michelle had written in March 2022. "Last night he spent 2 hours researching the best route for our summer vacation. 2 hours. Who does that?" I wanted to scream. Derek remembered that night. He'd been planning their trip to Yellowstone, trying to find the most efficient route that would let them see the most sights, without too much driving. He'd thought he was being helpful. He'd thought Michelle appreciated his attention to detail. Apparently, she'd been texting her lover about how boring he was, while he sat across the room mapping their vacation. The affair had evolved over 3 years, from passionate and secretive to comfortable and routine. They met once or twice a week, usually at a Hampton Inn near O'Hare Airport that charged $129 per night and accepted cash with no questions asked. Sometimes they met at Jason's office after hours when his assistant had gone home. Occasionally they risked lunch at restaurants far enough from both their neighborhoods that running into someone they knew was unlikely. They'd established cover stories that had clearly been refined over time. Michelle's Pilates classes happened conveniently at the same time as many of their meetings. Her work trips to cities like Denver and Phoenix often coincided with sales conferences that Jason attended. Her girls' nights with college friends sometimes ended at that Hampton Inn rather than any bar or restaurant. Derek felt sick as he catalogued the lies, not just the affair itself, but the elaborate infrastructure of deception Michelle had built to maintain it. The second phone, presumably purchased with cash and paid for with a prepaid plan, so nothing would show up on their joint phone bill. The gym bag that provided perfect cover for both the phone and her change of clothes. The careful alibis that gave her plausible deniability for any unexplained absence. She'd thought of everything. She'd been doing this for 3 years, and Derek, who prided himself on his ability to spot inconsistencies in financial statements worth millions of dollars, had never noticed a thing. But the messages revealed something even more devastating than the affair itself, something that made Derek's blood run cold. RC10. In February 2023, Michelle's messages to Jason took on a different tone. "Michelle, I need to talk to you about something. It's important. Jay, what's wrong? Is everything okay? Michelle, I'm pregnant." Derek remembered that day. Michelle had come home from work looking pale and shaken. She'd sat him down on the living room couch and told him, with tears streaming down her face, that she was pregnant. After years of trying, after all the fertility treatments and disappointments, it had finally happened naturally. Derek had cried. He'd held her for what felt like hours. He'd called his mother, who had wept with joy. He'd gone out that night and bought a stuffed elephant, because Michelle had always said if they had a baby, the nursery would have an elephant theme. He'd started mentally planning how to convert the spare bedroom. He'd looked at college savings plans, for God's sake. The pregnancy had lasted 11 weeks. Michelle had come home one evening in late April 2023 with red-rimmed eyes and told him she'd started bleeding at work. She'd gone to her OB/GYN, who had confirmed what she already knew. The baby was gone. A miscarriage. "These things happened," the doctor had said. "It wasn't anyone's fault. They could try again when Michelle was ready." Derek had been devastated. He'd taken a week off work to be with Michelle, who'd seemed inconsolable. They'd attended grief counseling together for 2 months. Derek had planted a small memorial garden in the backyard with a stone angel and a plaque that read, "Always in our hearts." He'd grieved for that baby for over a year. Sometimes he still thought about it, wondering if it would have been a boy or a girl, imagining what their life would have been like as parents. Now, reading the messages on Michelle's secret phone, Derek discovered the truth. "Jay, what do you mean you're pregnant? I thought you couldn't get pregnant, that's what you always said." "Michelle, I know, I thought so too. But I am. I took 3 tests." "Jay, Jesus, is it mine?" "Michelle, I don't know. It could be either of you. I've been with both of you." "Jay, what are we going to do?" "Michelle, I don't know. I need time to think." Derek scrolled forward through dozens of messages, his stomach churning. "Michelle, I've made a decision. I'm going to tell Derek it's his." "Jay, are you sure? What if it's actually mine?" "Michelle, it doesn't matter. Derek and I have been trying for years. He'll believe it. And honestly, even if it is yours, what would we do? You're not going to leave Linda, and I'm not ready to leave Derek. The timing isn't right. Jay, I guess you're right, but this feels wrong. Michelle, it's the only option that doesn't blow up both our lives. Then, 6 weeks later, Jay, how are you feeling? Michelle, tired, nauseous. Derek is being so attentive, it's almost smothering. He keeps asking if I need anything, bringing me crackers and ginger ale, reading pregnancy books out loud. Jay, that sounds nice actually. Michelle, it would be if I didn't feel like such a fraud. Sometimes I look at him and I can't believe how easily he believes everything I tell him. He's so trusting, it's almost pathetic. Derek had to stop reading. The word hit him like a punch to the gut. Pathetic. His wife thought his trust in her was pathetic. His love, his devotion, his willingness to believe in their marriage, all of it was pathetic to her. He forced himself to continue. The messages from late April 2023 revealed the final piece of the puzzle. Jay, I'm so sorry about what happened. Are you okay? Michelle, I'm fine. Relieved, actually. Jay, relieved. Michelle, I know that sounds horrible, but I was terrified. What if the baby had looked like you? What if Derek figured it out? This way I get all the sympathy without any of the risk. Derek has been incredible. He took time off work. He goes to grief counseling with me. He planted a whole memorial garden. I feel like an awful person, but I also feel like I dodged a bullet. Jay, wait. Michelle, did you actually have a miscarriage? Or did you... Michelle, don't ask me that. Please, just let it go. Jay, I need to know. Michelle, fine, no. I was never pregnant. I faked the whole thing. Jay, what? Why would you do that? Michelle, because I was late and I panicked. I took tests that came back negative, but I'd already told you I was pregnant and I didn't know how to walk it back. So I told Derek, too, to buy myself time. Then when I realized I definitely wasn't pregnant, I faked the miscarriage. It was easier than admitting I'd made a mistake. Jay, that's... Michelle, that's insane. Michelle, I know, but Derek believed every second of it. He's been treating me like glass for months. Honestly, it's improved our marriage. He's more attentive, more romantic, more present. The fake pregnancy did more for our relationship than 10 years of actual marriage. Jay, I don't know what to say. Michelle, don't say anything. Just forget about it. It's over, and no one got hurt. Derek set the phone down and sat in complete silence for a very long time. His wife had faked a pregnancy. She had faked a miscarriage. She had let him grieve for a baby that never existed. She had watched him cry, held him while he mourned, let him plant a memorial garden with a stone angel, and none of it had been real. It had all been a lie to cover up another lie, and she thought no one got hurt. Derek didn't confront Michelle that night. When she came home at 7:15, carrying her yoga mat and wearing her Lululemon leggings, her hair slightly damp from a shower she'd presumably taken somewhere other than Pilates class, Derek was in the kitchen finishing dinner. He'd put the phone back in her gym bag exactly where he'd found it. He'd washed his face to remove any trace of the tears he'd shed while reading. He'd composed himself into the role of the trusting, unsuspecting husband she apparently believed him to be. "Smells amazing," Michelle said, kissing him on the cheek. "Is that your famous chicken parm?" "Felt like cooking something special," Derek said, and his voice sounded normal. He was surprised by how normal it sounded. "How was Pilates?" "Great. Tough class. But I feel so good afterward. There's this new instructor who really pushes us." She was so casual with the lie, so practiced. Derek watched her face for any sign of guilt, any flicker of awareness that she was deceiving him. There was nothing. She looked exactly the same as she always looked. Happy to be home, tired from her day, hungry for dinner. How long had she been this way? Had she always been capable of such seamless dishonesty? Or had the affair taught her to compartmentalize so effectively that lying to her husband had become as natural as breathing? They ate dinner together at the kitchen table, the same table where they'd shared thousands of meals over the years. Michelle talked about work, a difficult client who kept changing the requirements for a campaign, a colleague who was up for promotion and didn't deserve it, the usual complaints of corporate life. Derek listened and nodded and asked appropriate follow-up questions. "You're quiet tonight," Michelle observed, halfway through her second glass of wine. "Everything okay at work?" "Just tired," Derek said. "Long day. You work too hard. We both do. We should take a vacation soon." "When's the last time we went somewhere just for fun?" "We went to Lake Geneva in August," Derek said, "for our anniversary." "That was nice," Michelle agreed. "But I mean somewhere farther, somewhere exciting. I was thinking maybe Italy next spring. You've always wanted to go to Italy." Derek had always wanted to go to Italy. He'd talked about it for years, the food, the history, the art. Michelle knew this because she'd listened to him dream out loud countless times. Now she was using that knowledge to play the role of the attentive wife who remembered her husband's wishes. "Italy sounds nice," Derek said. "We should start planning. Let's do it this weekend. We can look at flights and hotels, make a real trip out of it. 2 weeks, maybe 3 if we can swing it." "That sounds expensive," Derek said carefully. "We can afford it. We've been so responsible for so long. Don't we deserve to splurge a little?" Derek thought about the messages he'd read. Michelle and Jason had taken trips together too, short getaways disguised as work travel. A weekend in San Diego when Michelle had told Derek she was at a marketing conference. 3 days in Miami when she'd claimed to be visiting a client. How much of their money had she spent on those trips? How much of their savings had funded her affair? "Sure," Derek said. "Let's look this weekend." After dinner, they watched television together on the couch. Some reality show that Michelle liked and Derek endured. She curled up against him, her head on his shoulder, her hand resting on his chest. To anyone watching, they would have looked like the perfect couple. 15 years married and still affectionate. Derek felt nothing. Where there had once been love, comfort, and security, there was now only emptiness. The woman beside him was a stranger. She had been a stranger for 3 years, maybe longer. He'd just been too blind to see it. When they went to bed, Michelle fell asleep within minutes. Derek lay awake in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing through everything he'd learned and everything he still needed to know. He thought about confronting her right then, waking her up and demanding answers, throwing the phone at her, and watching her face as she realized her secret life was exposed. The thought was tempting. The anger bubbling beneath his carefully maintained calm wanted an outlet, but Derek had learned something in his career that most people never understood. The person with the best information always wins. Rushing to confrontation might feel satisfying in the moment, but it would give Michelle time to prepare, to spin, to craft a narrative that minimized her wrongdoing and maximized his culpability. She would cry and apologize and beg for forgiveness, and Derek would be left trying to process his emotions while she manipulated the conversation. No, Derek needed to be strategic. He needed to gather more information. He needed to understand the full scope of Michelle's deception before he made any moves, and he needed to protect himself financially and legally. After 15 years of marriage, a divorce could be complicated and expensive. If Michelle saw it coming, she might hide assets, fabricate claims, or otherwise position herself to take as much as possible in a settlement. Derek was not going to let that happen. He lay awake until nearly 3 a.m., forming a plan. By the time he finally drifted off to sleep, he knew exactly what he needed to do. The next morning, Derek called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Michelle had already left for the office by 7:30, kissing him goodbye and reminding him about their plan to research Italy trip options that weekend. Derek waited until her BMW disappeared around the corner, then got dressed and drove to the downtown Chicago office of Hartwell and Associates, one of the most respected family law firms in Illinois. He'd found them through careful research the night before, reading reviews and checking credentials, while Michelle slept peacefully beside him. The firm specialized in high-asset divorces and had a reputation for thorough preparation and aggressive representation. The attorney who met with him was named Patricia Chen, a partner in her mid-50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Her office was elegant but understated, with diplomas from Northwestern Law School on the wall and family photos on her desk showing 2 teenage children and a husband who looked like a college professor. "Tell me everything," Patricia said after they'd exchanged introductions, and Derek had signed a retainer agreement for $7,500. "Start from the beginning, and don't leave anything out." Derek told her everything: the secret phone, the 3 years of messages, the affair with Jason Whitmore, the fake pregnancy, the fake miscarriage. By the time he finished, Patricia's expression had shifted from professional neutrality to something that looked almost like sympathy. "Mr. Lawson," she said, "I've been practicing family law for 27 years, and I can tell you that what your wife did with the fake pregnancy and miscarriage is among the most psychologically cruel deceptions I've ever encountered. That's not just infidelity. That's emotional manipulation on a profound level." "Does it matter legally?" Derek asked. "For the divorce, I mean. Illinois is a no-fault divorce state, which means infidelity doesn't directly impact property division or support determinations. However, there are circumstances where marital misconduct can be considered, particularly if marital assets were dissipated during the affair. Did your wife spend significant amounts of money on this relationship? I don't know yet, Derek admitted. I need to investigate our finances more thoroughly. That's smart. Here's what I recommend. Don't confront your wife yet. Don't give her any indication that you know about the affair. Continue to act normally while we gather as much documentation as possible. I want bank records, credit card statements, phone records, anything that shows how she spent money over the past 3 years. I also want you to document the current state of your assets, home equity, retirement accounts, investments, everything. How long will this take? A few weeks to prepare properly. I know that's difficult when you're living with someone who's betrayed you so profoundly, but trust me, the preparation now will pay off in the final settlement. We want to have such an overwhelming case that your wife agrees to our terms rather than fighting us in court. Derek nodded. He understood the value of preparation. It was what he did for a living. What about the other man? He asked. Jason Whitmore. His wife doesn't know about the affair either. That's not technically your concern, Patricia said carefully. However, many people in your situation do choose to inform the other spouse. It's not illegal, and some would argue it's the ethical thing to do. But I'd recommend waiting until after your own divorce is settled. Complications from the other marriage could create unpredictable variables. What about suing him? I've heard of alienation of affection lawsuits. Illinois doesn't recognize alienation of affection as a cause of action. Some states do, but not here. I'm sorry. Derek left the meeting with a clear plan and a heavy heart. The next few weeks would be difficult, but he knew what he had to do. Play the role of the happy husband, gather evidence, prepare for battle. He spent the rest of that day beginning his investigation. As a senior financial analyst, Derek had access to tools and expertise that most people didn't. He started by pulling up all of their joint financial accounts online, downloading statements going back 3 years. He created spreadsheets tracking every transaction, highlighting anything that seemed suspicious or unexplained. The patterns emerged quickly once he knew what to look for. Regular cash withdrawals of $200 to $300, occurring roughly twice a month, that Michelle had never mentioned and Derek had never questioned. Credit card charges at restaurants in neighborhoods neither of them had any reason to visit. Hotel charges that had been buried among legitimate business expenses. A second credit card, listed in Michelle's name only, that Derek hadn't known existed. The statement showed a balance of $14,000, primarily spent on clothes, jewelry, and trips that hadn't appeared on their shared accounts. The total amount Michelle had spent on her affair over 3 years came to approximately $47,000. $47,000 that had come from their joint income, from money Derek had earned and saved, funding his wife's secret relationship with another man. Derek documented everything meticulously, creating files that would later prove essential in his divorce proceedings. The deeper he dug, the more he found. There was a pattern to Michelle's spending that he'd never noticed before. Every few weeks there would be a charge at a boutique clothing store in a neighborhood Michelle had no reason to visit. Derek cross-referenced these purchases with the dates of her meetings with Jason and found they correlated almost perfectly. She was buying outfits for her affair, dressing up for another man using money from their joint accounts. He found charges at jewelry stores too, small amounts, usually under $200, for items that Derek had never seen Michelle wear. Were these gifts for Jason? Accessories she wore only when she was with him? The thought made Derek's stomach turn, but he documented everything regardless. The hotel charges were the most damning. The Hampton Inn near O'Hare showed up repeatedly, always paid in cash according to Michelle's messages, but Derek found ATM withdrawals that corresponded to each visit. $200 here, $250 there, money that flowed out of their joint checking account and into Michelle's secret life. Derek created a master spreadsheet that tracked every suspicious transaction. He color-coded entries by category, affair-related expenses in red, unexplained cash withdrawals in yellow, charges at locations Michelle had no legitimate reason to visit in orange. When he finished, the spreadsheet looked like a heat map of betrayal, 3 years of deception visualized in neat rows and columns. The total was staggering. Beyond the $47,000 in direct affair expenses, there was another $23,000 in what Derek categorized as lifestyle inflation, purchases Michelle had made to maintain the image she projected to Jason. Designer bags she'd claimed were gifts from work, expensive skincare products she said she'd gotten on sale. a $3,400 watch she'd told Derek she'd bought with her bonus, though her bonus that year had been only $2,200. She'd been lying about money for as long as she'd been lying about Jason, maybe longer. Derek also discovered something that explained a mystery he'd wondered about for years. Their savings rate had always been lower than it should have been, given their combined income. Derek had attributed it to lifestyle creep, to the natural tendency of expenses to rise along with income. Now he understood the real reason. Michelle had been siphoning money into her secret life, maintaining two existences on a budget meant for one. The financial investigation took Derek nearly a week of evenings and weekends, but when he finished, he had a complete picture of his wife's deception. Every dollar she'd stolen from their marriage was documented. Every lie she'd told to cover her tracks was catalogued. Every excuse she'd made was refuted by cold, hard data. Derek was an accountant. Numbers were his language, and the numbers told a story of systematic, calculated betrayal that went far beyond a simple affair. He also did something he wasn't proud of, but felt was necessary. He accessed Michelle's personal email through a password recovery process, using security questions whose answers he knew from 15 years of marriage. Her maiden name, the name of her first pet, the city where they'd gotten married. The email account confirmed everything he'd found on the secret phone and revealed additional details: travel confirmations for trips with Jason, receipts for gifts Michelle had bought him, romantic messages that had been deleted from the phone but remained in her email trash folder. There was also something Derek hadn't expected: emails from a divorce attorney. Michelle had consulted with a lawyer 6 months ago in April 2024. The email chain discussed strategy for a high-asset divorce, asset protection, and the possibility of claiming a larger share of marital property based on her higher income and contributions to the household. She was planning to divorce him. She'd been planning it for months. The Italy trip she'd suggested, the increased attention she'd been paying to him, it was all calculated. She was buttering him up, creating the appearance of a happy marriage that she could later claim had deteriorated through no fault of her own. Derek printed everything, every email, every statement, every receipt. He created backup copies on multiple flash drives and stored them in a safe deposit box at a bank branch Michelle didn't know existed. He photographed the secret phone's contents and uploaded the images to a secure cloud account. By the end of that week, Derek had assembled a comprehensive case documenting 3 years of infidelity, financial deception, and premeditated divorce planning. His wife had no idea. The hardest part was going home each evening and pretending everything was normal, eating dinner with Michelle, watching television together, sleeping in the same bed. Every moment felt like a performance, a role Derek was playing in a production Michelle didn't know was about to end, but he was a patient man. He could wait. The 2 weeks after finding the secret phone, Derek made a decision that would change everything. He was going to contact Linda Whitmore, Jason's wife, not to expose the affair, at least not yet, but to gather information. He needed to know if Linda was as oblivious as he had been, or if there were cracks in the Whitmore marriage that might provide additional leverage. Finding Linda's contact information was easy. A basic Google search revealed her Facebook profile, which was set to partially public. Her photos showed an attractive woman in her mid-40s, with brown hair and a warm smile, posing with her children at soccer games and school events. She looked kind, happy, trusting. She looked exactly like Derek had looked before he'd found the phone. Derek created a new email account and drafted a carefully worded message. "Mrs. Whitmore, my name is Derek Lawson. I believe your husband Jason is having an affair with my wife Michelle. I have evidence spanning 3 years, including messages, hotel receipts, and travel records. I'm not contacting you to cause pain, but because I believe you deserve to know the truth, as I wish someone had told me before I discovered it on my own. If you would like to talk, please respond to this email. I understand if you choose not to believe me, but I can provide proof if you need it." He stared at the message for a long time before hitting send. This would set events in motion that couldn't be undone. Linda Whitmore's life was about to be shattered, just as Derek's had been. But didn't she deserve to know? Didn't she deserve the chance to make informed decisions about her own marriage? Derek had spent 2 weeks living with the truth while pretending everything was fine. It was exhausting and dehumanizing. He wouldn't wish that on anyone, but he also wouldn't let Linda remain trapped in a lie. He sent the email. The response came 4 hours later. "Mr. Lawson, I don't know who you are or why you're doing this, but my husband would never have an affair. We've been married for 16 years and have 2 beautiful children together. Jason is a good man and a devoted father. I don't know what you think you know, but you're mistaken. Please don't contact me again." Derek had expected this response. Denial was the first stage. He'd experienced it himself in the moments after finding the phone, desperately searching for any explanation other than the obvious one. He wrote back, "Mrs. Whitmore, I understand your reaction. I would have said the same thing 2 weeks ago, but I have proof. The affair has been going on since October 2021. They meet at a Hampton Inn near O'Hare, room charges paid in cash. They've taken trips together disguised as work travel. I can send you screenshots of their messages, hotel receipts, everything. I'm not asking you to believe me without evidence. I'm asking you to look at the evidence before you decide." He attached several screenshots from Michelle's secret phone, including messages where Jason mentioned Linda by name, complained about their marriage, and made plans to meet Michelle at specific times and places. The response came faster this time, just 20 minutes later. "Oh my God, those are his words. That's exactly how he texts. I recognize his writing style. Oh my God, is this real? Please tell me this isn't real." Derek called her. Linda Whitmore answered on the second ring, and she was crying. Through her sobs, she managed to explain that she'd confronted Jason immediately after receiving Derek's evidence. He'd denied everything at first, then claimed Michelle had pursued him aggressively, and he'd been too weak to resist, then finally admitted the truth when Linda showed him the screenshots. 3 years, Linda kept saying. 3 years and I had no idea. How could I not know? How could I be so stupid? "You're not stupid," Derek said. "I didn't know either. They were careful. They built an entire system to hide it from us." They talked for 2 hours. Linda shared details that Derek hadn't known, filling in gaps in the timeline. She told him about trips Jason had taken that now made sense, about late nights at the office that had actually been rendezvous with Michelle, about gifts Linda had found that Jason claimed were samples from vendors, but were probably from Michelle. "What are you going to do?" Linda asked eventually. "I'm divorcing her. My attorney is almost ready to file. What about you?" "I don't know. We have children. I don't know how to do this to them." "You're not doing anything to them," Derek said gently. "Jason did this. Jason made choices that destroyed your family. You're just responding to what he did." There was a long pause. "You're right. I know you're right, but it doesn't make it easier. It won't be easy. But living a lie isn't easy either." After hanging up, Derek felt a strange mix of emotions. There was satisfaction in knowing he wasn't alone, that someone else understood what he was going through. There was guilt for being the one to shatter Linda's illusions, and there was a growing sense that this confrontation was coming sooner than he'd planned. If Jason knew that Linda knew, he would almost certainly warn Michelle. The secret would be out. Derek's advantage of surprise would be lost. He called Patricia Chen. "We need to accelerate the timeline," he said. "File the divorce papers tomorrow." The divorce papers were served to Michelle at her office on a Friday afternoon. Derek had chosen the timing deliberately. Friday afternoon meant Michelle would have the entire weekend to process the shock without the structure of work to distract her. It also meant Derek would be home to witness her reaction, to observe how she handled being confronted with the consequences of her actions. He was sitting in the living room when she came home at 4:30, 2 hours earlier than usual. Her face was pale. Her hands were shaking. She was holding the envelope containing the divorce petition as if it might bite her. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, throwing the envelope on the coffee table. "Is this some kind of joke?" "It's not a joke," Derek said calmly. "I'm divorcing you." "Why? What did I do? I don't understand. Everything was fine. We were talking about going to Italy. Michelle, I found the phone." The color drained from her face. "What phone?" "The Samsung in your gym bag. The one you've been using to communicate with Jason Whitmore for 3 years. Michelle's mouth opened and closed several times. She looked like a fish gasping for air. Derek watched with detached curiosity, noting how different she looked when she couldn't control the narrative. "I can explain," she finally managed. "You can try." "Hey, it's not what you think. Jason and I are just friends. We text sometimes about work stuff. There's nothing romantic." "Michelle, I read the messages. All of them. 3 years of messages. I know about the Hampton Inn. I know about the trips to San Diego and Miami. I know about the pregnancy." Michelle flinched at that last word. "Derek, I know there was no pregnancy. I know there was no miscarriage. I know you faked the whole thing because you thought you were pregnant by your lover and couldn't figure out how to explain it." Michelle sat down heavily on the couch, all the fight going out of her. She looked small suddenly, diminished. The confident, ambitious woman Derek had married had been replaced by someone he didn't recognize. "How long have you known?" she whispered. 2 weeks. 2 weeks? You've known for 2 weeks, and you didn't say anything? I was gathering evidence, making sure I had everything I needed before I confronted you. That's so cold. Derek laughed, a harsh sound that surprised even him. Cold. You faked a miscarriage to manipulate me emotionally. You let me grieve for a baby that never existed. You've been sleeping with another man for 3 years while looking me in the eyes every day and telling me you loved me. And you think I'm cold? I do love you, Michelle said, and tears began streaming down her face. I know that sounds impossible right now, but I love you. The thing with Jason, it was a mistake. It got out of control, but it never meant I stopped loving you. It meant exactly that. If you loved me, you wouldn't have betrayed me. If you loved me, you would have talked to me about whatever was missing in our marriage, instead of finding it somewhere else. If you loved me, you wouldn't have spent 3 years lying to my face while planning to divorce me and take half of everything we've built. Michelle looked up sharply. How do you know about that? I know about the attorney you consulted in April. I know about your plans to position yourself for a favorable settlement. I know about the credit card I didn't know existed and the $14,000 balance you've been hiding. I know about the $47,000 you've spent on your affair over 3 years. I know everything, Michelle. Derek, please, can we talk about this? Can we try counseling? I'll end things with Jason. I'll do whatever it takes to save our marriage. There's no marriage left to save. You killed it 3 years ago. I just didn't know it was dead until 2 weeks ago. Michelle broke down completely then, sobbing into her hands. Derek watched without feeling anything. He'd expected this moment to bring some satisfaction, some sense of justice. Instead, he just felt tired. The divorce petition includes a detailed accounting of the marital assets and my proposal for division, Derek continued. My attorney recommends you get your own lawyer before responding. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. The easy way is you accept my terms, which are more than fair given what you've done. The hard way is we go to court, where all of this becomes public record. Your affair, the fake pregnancy, everything. You would do that? You would humiliate me publicly? I'd rather not, but I will if you force my hand. Michelle wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing her makeup. What are your terms? I keep the house. We split the retirement accounts 50-50. You keep your car, I keep mine. You reimburse the marital estate for the $47,000 you spent on your affair, either from your share of the assets or through future payments. No alimony for either party. Clean break. And if I don't agree, then we go to court. I have documentation of everything, Michelle, every message, every receipt, every lie. I have Linda Whitmore ready to testify about her husband's affair with you. I have evidence that you consulted a divorce attorney 6 months ago, which shows premeditation. I have proof of the fake pregnancy, which demonstrates a pattern of deliberate deception. How do you think a judge will view all of that? Michelle was silent for a long moment. You've really thought this through. I've had 2 weeks to think about nothing else. I don't even know who you are right now. The Derek I married would never be this calculating. The Derek you married trusted you. You taught him that trust was a mistake. Michelle stood up slowly, looking around the living room as if seeing it for the last time. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. But you have until Monday to get your things out. I'm changing the locks then. You can't do that. It's my house too. It's our house, and my attorney has filed a motion for exclusive occupancy based on evidence of infidelity and financial deception. You'll get the paperwork Monday. Until then, I suggest you find somewhere else to stay. Michelle stared at him with an expression Derek couldn't quite read. Shock, certainly. Anger, probably. But there was something else too, something that almost looked like respect. I really did love you, she said quietly. I know you don't believe that, but I did. Maybe you did. But love without loyalty is meaningless. You made your choices, Michelle. Now you have to live with them. She left that evening with 2 suitcases and her laptop. Derek watched from the window as her BMW pulled out of the driveway for the last time. He felt nothing but emptiness. The house was quiet after she left. Derek walked through the rooms, seeing them differently now. The bedroom where they'd slept together for 12 years, where Michelle had lain beside him night after night while carrying on her secret life. The kitchen where she'd kissed him goodbye every morning, already planning her next rendezvous with Jason. The living room where they'd talked about their future, about children they would never have, about growing old together. All of it had been a stage set for a performance. Michelle had been acting the role of a devoted wife while living an entirely different life off stage, and Derek had been the audience, applauding a show that existed only to deceive him. He went to the memorial garden in the backyard, the one he'd created for the baby that never existed. The stone angel still stood there, its wings spread in eternal prayer. The plaque still read, "Always in our hearts." Derek had tended this garden for over a year, pulling weeds, planting flowers, sitting on the small bench he'd installed so he could visit when he needed to feel close to the child he thought he'd lost. It had all been a lie. Every tear he'd shed, every prayer he'd whispered, every moment of grief had been manufactured by Michelle's deception. Derek picked up the stone angel. It was heavier than he expected, solid concrete that had weathered 18 months of rain and snow. He carried it to the garage and set it against the wall. Tomorrow he would throw it away, or maybe donate it to a thrift store where it could bring comfort to someone whose grief was real. The plaque he removed from the ground and placed in the trash. He wouldn't need any reminders of this particular lie. That night, alone in the house for the first time in 15 years, Derek poured himself a glass of bourbon and sat on the back deck. The November air was cold, but he didn't mind. The chill felt appropriate, matching the numbness inside him. He thought about calling his mother, but he couldn't face explaining everything to her right now. She'd loved Michelle, had treated her like the daughter she'd never had. Learning the truth would break her heart almost as much as it had broken Derek's. He thought about calling his best friend from college, but Matt lived in Seattle now, and they drifted apart over the years. Their friendship had become Christmas cards and occasional Facebook comments, not the kind of relationship that could support a crisis like this. In the end, Derek sat alone with his bourbon and his thoughts, processing the end of his marriage in the same methodical way he approached everything else in his life. He made mental lists of things that needed to be done. Change the locks, check. Cancel the credit cards Michelle had access to, check. Inform their accountant about the divorce, check. Figure out how to explain this to friends and family. Still working on that one. The practicalities were easy. It was the emotional work that would take time. Around midnight, Derek's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. He checked it and found a message from Linda Whitmore. "I told Jason to leave tonight. He's staying at a hotel. The kids are asking questions I don't know how to answer. But I wanted to thank you for telling me the truth, for not letting me live in a lie anymore. I know the next months will be hard, but at least I'm dealing with reality now instead of fantasy. That matters. Thank you." Derek typed back, "I'm sorry you're going through this, but you're right. Reality is better than fantasy, even when reality is painful. We'll both get through this. Reach out if you need someone to talk to who understands." He put down his phone and finished his bourbon. 2 marriages destroyed in one day. 2 families shattered by the same affair. It was devastating, and yet Derek couldn't shake the feeling that it was also somehow necessary. The lie couldn't have continued forever. Eventually, the truth always emerges. Better to face it now with clear eyes and prepared plans than to discover it years later when even more damage had been done. Derek went to bed alone for the first time in 15 years. The empty space beside him felt enormous, like a void that might swallow him if he let it. But he was also aware of something else, something unexpected. Relief. He no longer had to wonder why his marriage felt hollow. He no longer had to pretend that everything was fine when his instincts told him something was wrong. He no longer had to trust someone who had proven herself untrustworthy. The truth hurt, but the lie had been slowly killing him, and he hadn't even known it. Now the divorce was finalized 4 months later, in February 2025. The proceedings had been contentious at times, with moments of unexpected drama that reminded Derek why he'd hired Patricia Chen in the first place. During the discovery phase, Michelle's attorney had demanded access to Derek's personal devices, claiming he might have evidence of his own marital misconduct that would balance the scales. Patricia had shut that down immediately, pointing out that Derek wasn't the one who had maintained a 3-year affair and faked a pregnancy. "Your client's attempt to muddy the waters is transparent and offensive," Patricia had written in a blistering response. "Mr. Lawson's only misconduct was trusting his wife, a mistake he will not repeat." The deposition had been particularly difficult. Derek had to sit across from Michelle for 3 hours, while her attorney asked him questions designed to make him seem controlling, jealous, and emotionally unavailable. Had he ever checked Michelle's phone without permission? Had he ever questioned her work schedule? Had he ever expressed dissatisfaction with their marriage? Derek had answered honestly, no, and yes occasionally, as all married people do. But his honest answers couldn't be twisted into a narrative of abuse or control, no matter how hard Michelle's attorney tried. Then, it was Michelle's turn to be deposed. Derek sat in the conference room, As Patricia walked Michelle through the timeline of her affair, the fake pregnancy, the financial deceptions, Michelle's composure cracked about an hour in when Patricia produced the messages where Michelle had called Derek pathetic for trusting her. "Would you like me to read this aloud for the record?" Patricia asked coolly. "Or would you prefer to paraphrase?" Michelle had started crying then, real tears or performed ones. Derek couldn't tell anymore. Her attorney had called for a break, and when they returned, Michelle's demeanor had changed. The fight seemed to have gone out of her. The financial disclosure revealed even more than Derek had discovered on his own. Michelle had a retirement account she'd never mentioned, worth $67,000, funded through automatic payroll deductions that bypassed their joint accounts. She had a brokerage account with $23,000 in individual stocks. She had a whole life insurance policy worth $45,000 that named her mother as beneficiary instead of Derek. "She's been financially separating from you for at least 4 years, Patricia observed during a private meeting. "This wasn't an impulsive affair that got out of control. This was planned. She was building an exit strategy while you were planning anniversary trips to Italy. The mediation session had been brutal. Michelle and Derek sat on opposite sides of a conference table while a neutral mediator tried to help them reach agreement on property division. Michelle had started by asking for half of everything, plus alimony, claiming that Derek's emotional coldness had driven her to seek comfort elsewhere. Derek had laughed out loud at that one. Emotional coldness. "I planned surprise trips. I cooked elaborate dinners. I supported every career move you made. The only thing I didn't do was satisfy your need for excitement and drama, and apparently Jason Whitmore was happy to fill that role." The mediator had called for a recess. When they returned, Michelle's demands had moderated significantly. In the end, Michelle had fought at first, hiring an aggressive attorney who tried to challenge the evidence and claimed Derek had violated her privacy by accessing her phone and email. But Patricia Chen had anticipated that argument. "The evidence Derek had gathered wasn't obtained illegally," she explained to the judge. "The phone was found in a shared marital space. The email account was accessed using information known to both spouses. In a divorce proceeding, especially one involving allegations of financial misconduct, such evidence was generally admissible." The judge, a stern woman in her 60s who had clearly seen every possible variation of marital betrayal in her decades on the bench, was not sympathetic to Michelle's claims of privacy violation. "Mrs. Lawson," she said during one hearing, "you maintained a 3-year extramarital affair, faked a pregnancy and miscarriage to manipulate your husband emotionally, hid financial accounts from your spouse, and spent substantial marital assets on your affair partner. Your complaint that your husband invaded your privacy rings hollow under these circumstances." In the end, Michelle agreed to terms very close to what Derek had originally proposed. He kept the house. They split the retirement accounts. Michelle was ordered to reimburse the marital estate $38,000, slightly less than Derek had calculated, because some expenses couldn't be definitively tied to the affair. There was no alimony for either party. The total cost of the divorce, including attorney fees, came to about $45,000 for Derek. It was worth every penny. Jason Whitmore's divorce was messier and more protracted. Linda had initially wanted to try counseling for the sake of their children, but Jason's continued lies and the discovery of additional affairs he'd had before Michelle finally pushed her over the edge. She filed in January 2025 and spent the next 8 months in brutal litigation. Jason lost badly. Linda got primary custody of the children, the house, and alimony payments that would significantly impact his lifestyle for years to come. His reputation in the pharmaceutical industry was damaged by rumors that spread despite everyone's attempts at discretion. He was passed over for a promotion he'd been expecting and eventually left Vertex Medical Solutions for a smaller company in a different state, moving away from his children and the life he'd destroyed. Michelle's career also suffered, though not as dramatically. Word got around at Westfield Consumer Brands about the circumstances of her divorce. She wasn't fired, but she wasn't promoted either. The executive track she'd been climbing stalled out at marketing director. 2 years later, she would leave for a smaller company in another city, essentially starting over at a lower level. Derek ran into her once, about a year after the divorce was finalized. He was at a restaurant in downtown Chicago with a woman named Sarah, a graphic designer he'd met through mutual friends, and had been dating for 3 months. Michelle was at the bar with a man Derek didn't recognize, probably a new boyfriend. Their eyes met across the room. Michelle looked away first. Derek felt nothing, No anger, no sadness, no lingering attachment, just the recognition of someone he used to know, a character from a previous chapter of his life that had long since ended. And 3 years after finding the phone, Derek Lawson sat on the deck of a beach house in Outer Banks, North Carolina, watching the sun set over the Atlantic Ocean. Beside him was Sarah, now his wife of 14 months, her engagement ring catching the golden light. Inside the house, he could hear their friends laughing and opening bottles of wine, preparing for the dinner party they'd planned to celebrate Derek's 45th birthday. His life was different now, better in most ways, though he wouldn't have believed that was possible in the dark days after discovering Michelle's betrayal. He'd sold the house in Naperville eventually, unable to shake the memories that clung to every room. He'd used the proceeds to buy a condo in the city, closer to work, with a view of Lake Michigan that he watched every morning while drinking his coffee. He'd been promoted at Morrison & Webb to managing partner of his division, a role that came with more responsibility and a salary of $175,000 plus profit sharing. And he'd found love again, though it had taken time and therapy and a willingness to trust that he'd thought was permanently broken. The journey to trusting again had been harder than Derek expected. His first attempt at dating, about 8 months after the divorce was final, had ended in disaster. He'd met a woman named Karen through a dating app, and they'd gone on 3 dates that seemed promising. But on the 4th date, when Karen had casually mentioned that her ex-husband hadn't understood her need for independence, something in Derek had snapped. He'd seen Michelle's face superimposed over Karen's, heard echoes of the same excuses his ex-wife had used. He'd ended the date early and blocked Karen's number, then spent a week wondering if he was broken beyond repair. His therapist, a patient woman named Dr. Martinez who specialized in betrayal trauma, had helped him understand what had happened. "You're hypervigilant now," she'd explained. "Your brain learned that trust leads to devastation, so it's trying to protect you by seeing threats everywhere. That's a normal response to what you've been through, but it will prevent you from ever connecting with someone new if you don't learn to manage it." The therapy had been expensive, $175 per session twice a week for almost a year, but Derek counted it among the best investments he'd ever made. Dr. Martinez had helped him separate Michelle's betrayal from all relationships, to understand that what had happened said nothing about his worthiness of love and everything about Michelle's character. She'd also helped him process the fake pregnancy, which turned out to be the deepest wound of all. "You weren't just grieving a baby," Dr. Martinez had observed. "You were grieving the future you thought you were building, the family you thought you were becoming. When you found out none of it was real, you didn't just lose a child that never existed. You lost your understanding of reality itself." Derek had learned to rebuild that understanding, piece by piece. He'd learned to trust his own perceptions again, to believe what he saw and felt instead of constantly doubting himself. He'd learned that some people are capable of profound deception, but that didn't mean everyone was. Most importantly, he'd learned that surviving betrayal didn't make him weak or foolish. It made him someone who had chosen love and commitment, and been punished for it by someone who didn't deserve his devotion. Meeting Sarah had happened almost by accident. A mutual friend had invited them both to a gallery opening for a local artist, and they'd ended up standing next to each other in front of a painting they both disliked. Sarah had made a quiet joke about the artist's apparent inability to paint hands, and Derek had laughed for the first time in months. They'd spent the rest of the evening talking, first about art, then about books, then about everything and nothing. Their courtship had been slow by modern standards, 3 months of dating before they slept together, 6 months before Derek told her about Michelle, a full year before he said, "I love you" for the first time. Sarah had never pushed, never demanded more than he was ready to give. She'd simply been present, consistent, trustworthy in small ways that accumulated into something larger. "I knew you were carrying something heavy," Sarah told him once. "I could see it in your eyes, but I also knew you'd tell me when you were ready. Pushing would only have made it worse." When Derek had finally told her the full story of his first marriage, the affair, the fake pregnancy, the systematic deception, Sarah had listened without interrupting. When he finished, she'd been quiet for a long moment. "That's horrific," she'd finally said. "And I'm glad you told me, because now I understand why trust is so hard for you. And I can work with that. I can prove, one day at a time, that I'm not her." She had proven it, every day in small ways and large ones. By being where she said she would be, by answering her phone when he called, by never ever making him feel foolish for needing reassurance. The first time Derek had asked her about her whereabouts and she'd simply shown him her calendar without defensiveness or accusation, he'd felt something in his chest unlock that he hadn't even known was closed. Sarah was nothing like Michelle. She was quieter, more introverted, an artist rather than an executive. She had no interest in climbing corporate ladders or acquiring status symbols. She drove a 12-year-old Honda Civic because it still worked, and she saw no reason to replace it. She lived in a modest apartment in Logan Square and spent her weekends at museums and farmers markets, rather than shopping malls. When Derek had told her about his first marriage, about the affair and the fake pregnancy and the elaborate deception, Sarah had listened without judgment. "That says everything about who she was," Sarah had said, "and nothing about who you are. You're not responsible for the cruelty someone else chose to inflict on you." It was the first time Derek had truly believed that. He'd spent so long wondering what he'd done wrong, what he'd failed to provide that had sent Michelle into another man's arms. Sarah helped him understand that the affair wasn't about him at all. It was about Michelle's choices, Michelle's character, Michelle's willingness to betray someone who had never been anything but loyal to her. The therapy had helped, too. Derek had spent a year working with a counselor who specialized in betrayal trauma, unpacking the layers of grief and anger and shame that he'd buried beneath his practical focus on divorce proceedings. He'd learned that it was possible to be devastated and to survive. That trust, once broken, could be rebuilt with the right person. That the worst thing that ever happened to him didn't have to define the rest of his life. He still thought about Michelle sometimes, usually when something triggered a memory from their years together. A song they'd danced to at their wedding, a restaurant where they'd celebrated anniversaries, the smell of the specific laundry detergent she'd always insisted on buying, but the thoughts no longer hurt the way they once had. They were just memories, artifacts from a life that had ended, so that a new one could begin. "What are you thinking about?" Sarah asked, reaching over to take his hand. "How different things are now," Derek said. 3 years ago, I was living in a lie without even knowing it. Now I'm sitting on a beach with the woman I love, watching the sunset, surrounded by friends. It's like my whole life changed in a single moment. Because you found the phone. Because I found the phone. And because I decided to do something about it instead of looking away. Do you ever regret it? How it all went down?" Derek considered the question carefully. "I regret that any of it was necessary. I regret that I spent 15 years with someone who was capable of that kind of deception. But I don't regret how I handled it. I was strategic when I wanted to be impulsive. I protected myself legally and financially. And I made sure there were consequences for what she did. That's important to you, the consequences." "It is, not because I'm vindictive, but because actions should have outcomes. Michelle spent 3 years believing she could have everything, the stability of our marriage, and the excitement of her affair, with no downside. If I'd just accepted it, if I'd forgiven her and tried to move on, what would that have taught her? That betrayal has no cost, that you can manipulate the people who love you without ever facing accountability?" "She would have done it again," Sarah said quietly. "To you or to someone else? Probably. And Jason definitely would have. He'd done it before Michelle and he would have done it after. But now they both know that their actions have consequences. Maybe they've changed. Maybe they haven't. But at least they can't pretend anymore that the world lets you get away with anything." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to deep purple. The waves rolled in with their eternal rhythm, indifferent to human dramas and heartbreaks. "I'm happy," Derek said eventually. "I don't know if I said that often enough to you, but I am. Happier than I've ever been." Sarah squeezed his hand. "I know. I can see it. And I'm happy too. Even though I come with baggage. A failed first marriage, trust issues, a tendency to overanalyze everything. The overanalysis is actually pretty adorable," Sarah said with a smile. "And the rest of it just means you've lived. You've experienced things. You know what matters and what doesn't. I'd rather be with someone who's been through hard times and come out stronger than someone who's never been tested." Derek leaned over and kissed her, grateful beyond words for this second chance at happiness that he'd never expected to find. Inside the house, someone called out that dinner was ready. Derek and Sarah stood up, brushing sand from their clothes, and walked hand in hand toward the light and warmth of their friends. As he crossed the threshold, Derek thought one last time about that Tuesday evening in October 2024 when he'd found the secret phone. The worst moment of his life had also been the beginning of his liberation. He'd discovered a terrible truth, and that truth had set him free. The story of Derek Lawson and Michelle isn't just about infidelity or revenge. It's about the masks people wear and the lies they tell, not just to others, but to themselves. Michelle convinced herself that she could love Derek while simultaneously betraying him. She convinced herself that the fake pregnancy was a victimless deception. She convinced herself that she deserved both the security of her marriage and the excitement of her affair. She was wrong about all of it. Jason convinced himself that his affairs were separate from his family life, that what Linda didn't know couldn't hurt her, that he could be a good husband and father while violating his vows repeatedly. He was wrong too. The truth always comes out eventually. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. And when it does, the consequences are far worse than they would have been if honesty had come first. Derek learned something important through all of this. He learned that trust, once broken, can never be fully restored with the person who broke it, but it can be rebuilt with someone new, someone worthy of it, someone who understands that trust is not just a feeling, but a daily choice. He learned that the pain of betrayal, as devastating as it is, does not have to define you. You can grieve what you've lost, learn from the experience, and move forward into a life that's actually better because you know now what you didn't know before. And he learned that actions have consequences, that people who choose deception should not be protected from the results of their choices, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to stop loving someone who has proven they don't deserve it. Michelle and Jason both had opportunities to be honest. Every day for 3 years, they woke up and chose to continue their lies. They chose the affair over their marriages, excitement over stability, selfishness over loyalty. When those choices finally caught up with them, they had no one to blame but themselves. Derek didn't destroy his marriage. Michelle did, one lie at a time, one betrayal after another, until there was nothing left but the illusion of a partnership that had actually died years before. All Derek did was stop pretending the illusion was real. Some people might say he should have given Michelle another chance. That 15 years of marriage deserved more than a strategic divorce proceeding. That forgiveness and reconciliation are always possible if both parties are willing to try. But forgiveness requires honesty. Reconciliation requires genuine remorse, not just regret at being caught. And Michelle had spent 3 years proving that honesty and genuine remorse were not in her character. Derek made the right choice. He protected himself, he ensured accountability, and he opened the door to a future that turned out to be better than anything he'd had before. Sometimes the best thing that ever happens to you starts as the worst thing that ever happens to you. Sometimes discovering a terrible truth is the first step toward building a beautiful life. Sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of another, better one. Derek Lawson found a secret phone in his wife's gym bag, and it shattered everything he thought he knew. But from those broken pieces, he built something stronger, something real, something true. And that, in the end, is all any of us can do. If you enjoyed this story, like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.